Right, so we're going to record the event and everyone's going to be muted, so we can't hear all the rustling and the dogs in the background, which is normally my problem. What we thought is if everyone used the chat function, if you know how to use that up in the top corner, and then just pop your questions in there and we'll either answer them at the end or as we get going, or but we'll make sure all your questions are answered via that. We've got a packed agenda, so we're going to have to, am I on the right slide? Is Amanda on the right slide? Just one moment whilst we sort the IT out. Oh, that was me. So we
had a slight freeze.
Did you? Well, we'll work this out. We'll get there, won't we? So we've got a full agenda with some very distinguished guest speakers before us. We're hoping to be done by 4 o'clock. So I'm going to have to be quite strict on timekeeping for everyone. We will have a rate the event at the end, just so we know what you thought we did. There I am, in case you didn't know what I looked like. So this is the third leg of our Ticket to Ride events, and both Malvern Hills and Wychavon are committed to supporting community transport in order to meet local community need. We're particularly delighted to have Nigel, hopefully, in a minute with us from First Group, so he can set out the picture from the public transport perspective, because I think that's really important, how we all fit in with public transport. I know at the moment with COVID, it's a bit different, but that'll be great. And then we've got Rini from Midlands Connect to update us on the future of rural mobility study, which we're being a pilot of.
Hello. Yeah.
We got someone there?
Where they gone?
No, we're all here.
Is she? Have you spoken to Chris then?
I have no idea what that is. Anyway, we'll push on. So Amanda is going to run us through the next slides for us.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I recognise Mo's little voice there. Mo, if you could pop yourself on mute, that would be fab, my love. Thank you. So yeah, as Sarah says, welcome. This is our third event, and our focus for those of you that are new to this event is essentially to raise the profile of community transport. Many of you will know, those of you that are community transport providers, you are much more than just transport, and COVID has probably shone a light on that in terms of the type of response that you provide. Certainly in terms of how we support people through their own isolation and loneliness as a critical factor. We've got technology as one of our priorities, and we'll be hearing from Nick Conley from Community First on some technological solutions for our rural communities, so we look forward to that. The business case, I mentioned that in the next slide, so I'll give a bit of a summary on that at the next point. And of course, key was around how we work with the voluntary and community sector to develop the Good Neighbour Network model and other sort of community support groups that exist. And we'll be hearing from Claire Thomas from Age UK and Helen Gray from Evesham Volunteer Centre that will be able to kind of tell that story of place. In terms of developing opportunities for the private sector, our Speyside platform, which we'll talk a bit more about today, provides an opportunity for private sector investment in local communities, and particularly about how we can encourage businesses to give more as part of their corporate social responsibility. We've also started to do some facilitation with Malvern Hills Car Club and introducing them to local businesses to see whether there's opportunities for electrical car solutions for those businesses. And then the final component, is around building connectivity. And both Malvern Hills and Wychavon District Councils are committed to developing an asset-based community development strategy. And we're looking to change the way we work to support community for those asset-based approaches. So next slide, please. So in terms of what we've achieved to date, clearly how we support community transport providers to enable them to become an integral part of the transport network is critical to that. And we'll hear, hopefully, if he's joined us, from Nigel in relation to that story of place around public transport. but it's very much how we as a district council can support and enable community transport provision for our local communities. And it's about how we can help facilitate local solutions, bringing together stakeholders to develop the most appropriate solutions for their area, and hence our commitment to facilitating these sort of events. You know, there's a number of different parties, interested parties that have got a role to play. So it's how we work better together to get those local outcomes and solutions. So in terms of the business rates pilot, the project was effectively around reducing demand for health and social care to improve health and well-being and reduce inequalities. And that's where the essence of the work that we're doing focuses on. And there are three strands to it. One was about an integrated investment in sustainable and innovative citizen-led community transport initiatives, Speyside being the platform of choice in terms of how we drive that forward. Second strand was around improving community capacity and establishing sustainable networks that will carry on without public sector resources, acknowledging we're in a period of austerity and how we work collaboratively with our communities to find solutions that work for them. And the Good Neighbour network is part of that. And the third one was around how we develop a digital pathway for community-based transport solutions for accessing health and social care services. And a key component there is that we know that all of community transport journeys, 52% of them are for health and social care needs. So clearly there's a need to better plug in to the health and social care framework in order to give community transport provision a voice. I'll speak a bit later along with Caitlin around the Ticket to Ride fund that's through the Speyside platform. But essentially, this is a 3-year project which has 4 main components: asset-based working, permission to innovate, invest in our communities, and place-based working. Now, hopefully at this point, I'll be able to hand over to Nigel. It's one of those where you go, Nigel, are you there?
I'm not sure that he is. We might have to go to the next guest speaker.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And then if Nigel is able to join us, then we'll bring him in when we can. Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, we're whizzing through the slides at a rate of knots.
Any other business?
No, I know this. Yeah, we've suddenly done the whole lot. So at this
Really,
point, I'll hand over to Rini, who's definitely there because I've seen her.
I am here.
Well, welcome.
Yeah, I see the slides haven't quite pasted that well, so I hope we haven't missed any more text than what's already missing here. I've also got my own copy, so because I've got speaking notes. So if I'm looking this way, it's because I'm looking at those. Right, let's see where we are with the slide 1. Okay, so yeah, the first slide really is to explain what Midlands Connect is. So we are a partnership, so we include local authorities, local enterprise partnerships, chambers and the airports, and we cover the West Midlands and the East Midlands region, except Northamptonshire, who have joined the English Economic Heartland region. So yeah, we are the sort of the transport voice of the Midlands, and we very much focus on research, developing and recommending major transport schemes. And you know, we have a number. Obviously, we're most known for our big urban areas, really, like the cities, like Birmingham, you know, Derby, Leicester, Nottingham sort of areas. But actually, we have quite a vast sort of rural area as well, as you know, seeing as you live in the area as I do. I live in Shropshire, so not that far away. Nationally, the future of mobility has very much been around cities and towns. And actually, we felt like we needed to assess transport and accessibility needs of more rural areas. So we focused on the human and business needs in rural areas for this study. This was commissioned in 2019, so this is the first phase. After looking at the needs, we then considered options and technological information. Produced a toolkit, which is kind of a menu of options. and I'll talk you through some of the findings. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So the main thing, to emphasize when we're talking about the future of transport and transport in general, can we move on to the slide that says rural areas are different? Thank you. Rural areas are different, as we all know. They're different from urban areas, but also different from each other. There's a more varied economy, so things like manufacturing and construction are bigger shares, and also tourism and agriculture. There's lots of protected environments like AONBs and the national park, which are valued for the biodiversity and access to green open space. A rural area might be quite close to an urban centre, but could also be very remote. Many rural areas are suffering with, well, not suffering, but having aging population, so that brings their own challenges. And at the same time, the bus services are being reduced due to the cost and due to sort of dropping patronage, really, sort of the traditional bus services. With COVID, obviously the pressure on funding has only got worse, really. Other things like people are usually, usually takes twice as long to get to hospitals and secondary schools. So transport cost is higher for the user and the transport provider. It's more expensive to provide healthcare in rural areas because populations are older but also more spread out. Health sector and businesses in rural areas really struggle to recruit and retain suitably qualified employees. So in short, really, the report found that the transport and access issues faced by rural communities and businesses are substantially different to those in more urban settings. So on the next slide, it sets out 3 broad options for serving rural mobility needs. So this is sort of how you're looking at providing transport and that sort of thing. So, taking people to places is the very traditional way of doing things. So, and it's worth bearing in mind that the more specialised the trip is, the further the need is to travel. And then, sorry, somebody's not on mute, I think. So then there's taking goods and services to people. So this could be at home or it could be at hubs. And of course, there's increased home deliveries, and obviously almost everyone's working from home now if they can. So especially now, this is really quite current. And then finally, there's the option of replacing transport with communication. So again, home working, home-based learning opportunities. But there is a social aspect to this, and that's the risk of isolation, which we can't ignore. So yes, the next slide shows like the toolkit that the study output. So it's got this on the one side, which is a nice illustration of all the different elements that might, all the different tools that might be used. Excuse me, and on the other side, there's a sort of a table that shows on the one hand rural needs. Sorry, it's still on the same slide. So rural needs like community cohesion and accessing key services, education and training, all those sort of things. And then on the other hand, in the toolkit, it talks about the type of tools that could address those needs, and there's like a bit of a cross-reference. So one of the tools that was explored in this toolkit was the rural hubs, which is an idea that we thought was really interesting. And so that's why phase 2 is exploring, we've just finished it, explored rural hubs. So phase 2 is very much around developing a set of guidance for our local authorities, and that would help them identify where hubs should go, what type of what type of services they could provide, and also what the commercial considerations are. So how the hub should be operated, not just in terms of funding, but also in terms of what kind of services, infrastructure, booking systems, all those sort of things, what kind of things that are needed. And then the second stage of the study was to look at 4 pilot areas and just do a sort of a brief desktop study, just to sort of test the guidance as well as just see how it worked in practice. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief, the sort of how we view hubs. So the first thing to mention is that it's not just about transport, so it's not a mobility hub specifically, but what we're trying to do is to reduce the length of the last mile, because in transport we always talk about the last mile, and actually in rural areas that could be anything up to 15 miles, not quite a mile specifically. So that's one element. And then the other element is bringing lots of activities together in one space. I know I have too many slides for my 15 minutes, so I'll try and go through a few. I might skip a few. This is the next slide. Sort of shows us the sort of how we went about doing this study. So first we looked at specific rural areas. So we did some case studies. We looked at the types of rural areas, but also the type of people that live in those areas using market segmentation data. So people probably know Experian, but we also have other types, other data sets are available, sort of thing. And so that's the sort of rural persona type of things. And then we sort of looked at, well, the type of hub components that could be used to serve the needs and the types of areas that are there. Then the next stage we looked at the operational commercial framework. So and we sort of really tried to structure that around a place, people, activity concept. So because we know that a hub design will be most successful when it's specific to the needs of the local context. You know, this will help to make the hub fit for purpose. Then we looked at the application of technology. So that's mostly transport technology, things like you know, autonomous cars, buses, e-bikes, charging, all those sort of things. But also we looked at the digital connectivity, because that enables a lot of future innovation, like autonomous vehicles and you know, advanced passenger information, all those sort of things. So based on the sort of the commercial sort of elements to it, we also did, we looked at sort of what the energy and the digital needs of those hubs would be, and what kind of information, booking systems and payment channels that would be needed for the services that would be used. And finally, we did a consequences analysis, so making sure that nobody gets left behind, because you know, not everybody uses the internet, not everybody has a bank account or a payment card, and you know, things like that. And then finally, we brought all that those sort of first three blobs together to produce the guidance, and we did a desktop study of the first stages, not the whole process, but the first stages for 4 different areas, which is these 4 different areas. So one of those, of course, was Malvern Hills. So it was looking at obviously this is the most populated area of the 4, but what we try to do for this study is really looking at a range of different types of places and different sizes of places. So Malvern was at the sort of larger end of that. So I've got some slides next on the different steps in the guidance. And I'll try and pick out a few things that we looked at for Malvern specifically. So in the first step, you look at the strategic need for hubs. So you know, why are you looking at hubs in the first place? What's the sort of, what kind of strategy and policy context do you have? So in Malvern, obviously, it's the main town. It has many functions already, but then you know, we did look at the various bits of policy. So the sort of the South Worcestershire Development Plan, which looked at, you know, the importance of Malvern as a centre for the area really, but also we looked at trends and opportunities in transport, community transport and things like that. So and one of the things that we found was that there's a concern about isolation, there's a concern about people accessing services, maybe not necessarily the ones that live in the town themselves, but in the wider sort of rural area. So step 2, confirm the locations, very much around just saying, looking at what the status of the place is. So Malvern itself is technically an urban area and an urban town, but because it's got such a rural hinterland, we decided that it was rural enough, so to speak, to benefit from a hub in a way. So then step 3, you look at agglomeration opportunities. That basically means that you look at what services have already been provided. And, you know, so are there existing hubs? They might not be called hubs, but there are existing places that provide multiple services. And how can all those different places interact as a network? And would a new hub help to complete the service offer? And then finally, looking at identifying broad rural hub locations. So it's looking at the type of settlement. So in this case, a town, outline the needs of that place and look at the personas that I talked about earlier. So the market data around the type of people that live in places, and then combine that to work out the type of hubs that's needed. So local level concept then. We're looking at identifying what kind of components are needed based on the type of people that live in the area, the type of place that it is. You know, you look at the catchment, all those sort of things, and that kind of comes up with a long list of the services that you might provide at a hub. And then in step 6, you look at the objectives that you might have set earlier on in the so based on the strategic context, and sort of really sift through all the different types of services that you've already listed in the previous step, and sort of prioritize them and think, well, which ones are actually the most important, which ones aren't already provided in other places. And based on that, you look at what kind of operational specification you need. So it's things like, do you need curb space? Can all the components be delivered by the same operator, or do you need different organizations to run different parts of it, all those sort of things. And then the operational model assessment really is about identifying what's needed for each component. So what's needed in terms of infrastructure, in terms of energy provision, in terms of data and communications, and also human capital, so staff, and the effect on what that has on the specification. So the last stage that we did in the for the actual pilot is looking at potential sites within the area. So in this case, we looked at the Great Malvern train station, as well as the Malvern Cube and the Malvern Vale Community Centre. So we're, you know, the last two obviously already provide a number of different types of services. So it's looking at, you know, can we expand the service offering there rather than start a new hub? And of course, the station already has a number of transport services, but perhaps not any other types of services like healthcare or those sort of things. So looking at where components are, where hub components or services are already provided, and can we add additional services there? And then finally, we listed the 3 locations and tested them against the objectives and the type of services that are already been provided or could be provided at those locations. Yes, might as well continue. So these steps haven't been done in the pilot because it really needs more communication and more engagement with the community before you can move on from this stage, really. So looking at the resource model, it's really about how you deliver and operate and maintain the hub from right from the start of opening it up. Looking at step 12, looking at the roles and responsibilities. So is it delivered by a single party? Is there multiple organizations? And if there's multiple organizations, how do they work together and coordinate their activities? Funding, of course, always a big issue. So we looked at income streams, whether it could be self-financing, whether it would need ongoing support, or a combination of all those. And step 14 is very much around the overall resource model. So that kind of just summarizes how the hub will be run, how it will be procured, and assess that all against the success criteria. So stage 5 then is it's just really a final evaluation, looking at all the information that you've looked at to date, summarising it, making sure that project management and governance are all put in place, setting programmes, targets, business plans, all those sort of things. And then finally, you know, you go back, you review and confirm. So you go back and just go through everything, make sure everything, crossing all the T's and dotting the I's, sort of thing. So sort of, I wasn't involved myself in doing the desktop studies. Our consultants did that for us. So, but reading through the information they provided, these are the sort of main things that I picked out. So mental health was an issue or was considered a concern. Things like using existing places, because obviously Malvern being a slightly bigger place and many services are already being provided, it's just providing access to them. So that's then, you know, improving rural mobility, and I guess that's where things like community transport and demand responsive transport and traditional bus services all come into play. In terms of local level concept, yeah, there's quite a wide range of needs. So there's, you know, quite a lot of settled households in the area, but also there was, you know, there's quite different types of people. So there's, you know, there's sort of more the better off retired people, but there's also young families that are struggling. Some need education for secondary, some need primary school access, some need healthcare access. So there's all sort of different types of needs in the area, which makes it quite difficult to determine really what specifically you want to provide. And as a result of all the different types of needs, the suggestion was to have one larger hub which then connects to existing smaller ones. And finally, then the site-specific analysis I kind of already looked at. I already mentioned the 3 locations that were considered, and then the study actually selected the railway station because there's so many services already in place that actually the transport mobility is probably the main focus for this hub in terms of getting people into the local area so that they can then access the services that already exist. But as I said before, stakeholder and community engagement really is key in continue this work and actually getting to a stage of considering opening a specific hub. So then in terms of next steps, so we're currently, we've done the desktop sort of study testing the guidance, but we're actually hoping to test this in more depth with 4 local authorities in our partnership. So we've written out a small funding competition where we've got a little bit of funding for them to do that. And then once we've got the feedback from those projects, we can tweak the guidance and finalize it. We're also looking at some more broad rural economy projects. So we've got, as of last year, we've got a head, what we call a lead economist within Midlands Connect. So he's going to be looking at various different work streams, looking at what the needs for rural places are, how transport relates to the local economy, and how transport improvements, what kind of transport improvements would really help rural areas. And then the next stage for my team really is very much around rethinking rural public transport, because we know that funding is being squeezed for traditional bus services. And really, we're interested to find out from the broader community, business community almost. So we're hoping to speak to academics, to innovators, to all sorts of startups, all those sort of things. And really thinking about how we can improve the service and how we can improve how people are being transported across the region, really, whilst also trying to save costs. So I think that is my last slide. It is indeed. So yeah, that was a bit of a flying visit through all the work that we've been doing over the last year or two and what we're looking at in the future. So I don't know whether anyone has any questions or whether we do Q&A later.
I've got a question in the chat from Maddie. We've got 5 minutes, so I thought I'd just do Maddie.
Okay,
Maddie,
yeah.
sorry, Sumner.
Shall I ask it?
Go on then.
I was asking, you mentioned about consulting with community transport and looking at what it currently delivers. I certainly, as community transport advisor for the county, never had any contact. And I believe most of our schemes that have just come back to me have not had contact either. So I just wondered what that consultation was and how you know what is being delivered in Worcestershire.
So at the moment, it's mostly the first stage, the first pilot was very much desktop study. So, and that's why I was emphasising that this is something that needs to be done going forward, very much. So this was really an example of showing how the guidance can work up to a certain extent, because I personally believe that the community knows much better what they need than we in an office in Birmingham, or in this case spread across the Midlands because we're all working from home, would know. So we did speak to Amy at Worcestershire County Council. I think, no, it was Amanda, wasn't it, that we spoke to? It wasn't me personally, so yeah, a little bit confused. So yeah, there was some engagement with the local authority, but we didn't do any actual engagement at this point in time. But when the local authorities are applying this guidance in their local areas, we are very much expecting them to do that.
So is it coming back to the local authority then to do that local consultation?
Yes,
Based on
if this
the...
is something, yeah, if hubs is something that they want to take forward, which of course we hope they do, then it would be down to the local authority, so the transport authority, so that'd be the county council, to take that forward.
Right, I just need to be very sure and clear who that person is within our authority, because I don't know who it is at the moment.
Can I ask Amanda to pop
Yeah,
in here?
thank you, Sarah. So those of you that know me will know that I bustled my way in on the consultation for this piece of work, which is why Malvern is a pilot. So I shared information from the Community Transport Consortium on the value of CT, that major report that I think, David, you led on some time ago now. And I also shared the work that Community First have done in terms of those village hubs. So that's where a third bit, a third tranche of that evidence derived from. I think in addition to that, Maddie, I think your colleague, Michelle Jones, is a liaison point at the county, and Rini will correct me, but there was a 3 counties steering group that was set up, of which it included representation from the county council. Thank you.
Okay, is that all right, Madeline?
Yeah, thank you. I can follow that up.
We can all get on the same page then, hopefully. And so I'm struggling here because I'm having to scroll across to see everyone's little face at the bottom. It's not really working on an iPad. I think we've got to move on, unless there's one more quick question. I think I saw a hand up somewhere. Has anyone got a question? Shout out now. No, I think we're all right. Okay, in that case, we will go on to our next speaker.
Sorry, Sarah. I acknowledge that John Driver has said that he's doing a piece of work for County Consortium on electric vehicles. So again, we can share that with colleagues.
Wonderful.
The full pictures.
Great. Yeah, I'm trying to do chat as well as faces. It's really very complicated. So next we've got David Muggeridge, who's the chair of Worcestershire Community Transport Consortium.
Hi,
so
good afternoon.
Any
I'm
questions?
here. Yep.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Put them in the chat box.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I can only see 6 people on my screen with the slides, so but I understand there's 32 people here, so I'm glad I combed my hair this afternoon. I'm the current chair of Worcester Consortium of Community Transport Providers. There are about 16 schemes around the county, not all of whom are members, but we're a mixture of resource. Some are exclusively bus, which is my organisation. Some have buses and cars, some are cars only. Some have employed staff, as we do, or as I do, and some are entirely volunteer-led. So there's a real spread of organisations across the whole county helping people get around. And what I'm going to talk about really this afternoon is sort of, summarise what's gone on over the last 12 months very briefly, and just talk about what we're currently doing. We're all familiar with the sort of lockdown number 1. And at that point, because it was a very unknown situation, pretty well all schemes pretty much closed their doors to journeys unless they had contracts that they had to service for the county council, because it was just new and, you know, a bit scary for everybody really. But in the main, most schemes did take up telephone befriending services and offering shopping services, because obviously they're all very parochial, so they knew who the most vulnerable people were in their communities. And so pretty well everybody grasped that particular nettle and carried on with that. And after a few months, once things opened up a little bit, there's a bit of confidence starting to return to organisations. One of the major problems, of course, was getting all the PPE and risk assessments in place, which was a bit of a challenge because of funding. But at the time, there was a lot of money around for PPE, a lot of grants available, which was very useful for those schemes. And then gradually, pretty well everyone opened up in the early part of the summer. And in the main, shoppers returned, and so did, of course, to a very limited degree initially, did medical appointments. We all know what the situation was, with hospitals being very wary of sending people for medical appointments and unnecessary or whatever. So that sort of, there was a very slow restart of community transport. But it is fair to say that whilst shoppers and medicals reappeared, the social clubs, the lunch clubs, all the sort of things that are good for mental health, that just has not returned. And one of the concerns for many of the organisations is we charge a fare, everybody charges a modest fare with a small margin on top to cover the required overheads of insurances and rent and telecommunications, etc., etc. And one of the concerns is, of course, income streams are, you know, diminishing, as it were, and there's no sort of like good news on the horizon. Grants are much more difficult to get hold of now. And so there is some anxiety within the sector, as with every other sector, as to what the future is going to look like, you know, in 12 months' time. We all want to get back to a new normal, with clubs and things returning, but that doesn't look, it looks a little bit bleak at the moment, is all I can say. One of the other things the sector does, with some support from the County Council, is offer an 0300 telephone helpline across the whole county, where people phone the number and they're signposted to their local scheme. And that has really taken off, particularly since January, especially with the COVID vaccinations. The scheme used to tick along, you know, fairly modestly with a few inquiries, but in January it really, really did take off, understandably. People were getting requests to go to Millennium Point in Birmingham or wherever. And so that particular helpline, which has been managed, has become a lot more active recently, which is good. The thing is, I do feel it's a little bit of a get out of jail card for the current provider of hospital transport across the county, EZEC or EZ, I think they're called, because naturally they provide hospital transport. They don't provide transport for people with mobility issues or who need a specially adapted vehicle to get to a COVID vaccination. So consequently, in the early part of January, certainly that helpline number really took off, with people really sort of desperate to get a vaccination and wanting help. Obviously, we signposted to the schemes, and it was really down to the schemes who were able to help them. I do know that Worcester Wheels stepped up and they were doing Sunday deliveries, as it were, so which is good, but it is a little bit of a challenge. The number does seem to be quite widely available within the some parts of the hospital services. I've had phone calls. Well, I had a phone call yesterday from Hereford Hospital. They kind of think we can sort of turn up on demand. So there's a little bit of an education process to take place there. But certainly I've had requests from Worcester Royal most recently, where they said, we're having to close our department today and redirect all our scheduled appointments to the Alex in Redditch. So can you help with that? So again, it's just a signposting service, and we do rely on the schemes being able to help. But one of the issues is, of course, we're not demand responsive in the same way as a sort of taxi company, what have you. We have to phone around volunteers. So we do require a little bit of notice. But I do know that some schemes have gone above and beyond in helping people in their local community. One of my colleagues who's going to be speaking later on more about the good neighbours side of things, Helen, will probably be able to expand on that a little bit. And so that's very much what we're doing. We're just, we're sort of marking time, as it were. It's very difficult to plan with the sort of the global situation we have at the moment. We're open, we're active, we're helping people get into medical appointments. We're taking people shopping. An interesting thing is in the last 2 lockdowns, all of our shoppers for our own scheme returned, and they were very anxious that we would continue to remain open and take them shopping rather than shut up shop. And we have done that. And so there's been no real drop off in the people. And you must remember, many of these people are in their 80s, some in their 90s, who are very keen to get out and get to a shop, get to a supermarket, and not feel quite so isolated. And 1 or 2 schemes also made arrangements with local supermarkets to do local deliveries, which has been useful. The co-op in particular, because they used a lot of volunteer schemes, because the co-op supermarket, as you probably know, doesn't have a home delivery service. So they linked up with a number of local schemes, my own included, and we deliver twice a week for the cooperative group as well. That can be a little bit of a challenge. We turned up on one occasion and there was sort of 6 or 8 crates, 12 bottles of water, 12 bottles of this. And they did actually say, oh, we save all the heavy stuff for you guys, which is a little bit naughty, but, hey ho. Anybody who does supermarket shopping and has home delivery does probably know that you can't just order an unlimited number of heavy items. But we do, you do what you can, of course you do. So that's a lot of what we're doing, just keeping the show on the road, helping people as much as we possibly can, offering the 0300 helpline service, which was actually sort of not a directive, but it was a sort of a suggestion from the county council. They said, we think this would be a good idea. We put a lot of leaflets together. There's a website. It's amazing how many people actually look at the website where the details of all the schemes are, and then they phone the 0300 number instead. But hey, it's at the top of the page, so who can blame them for that? But we're also getting inquiries on that helpline number from outside of the county. I dealt with yesterday a call from Hereford Hospital, and also there was a gentleman who lives in Warwickshire. But that's, I suppose it illustrates that the number is getting out there, and we can obviously signpost to schemes outside of Worcestershire because it doesn't take too much to Google and help somebody on the end of a phone. So that's pretty well where we are, actually. If anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I was curious about the previous speaker. I was going to ask the same question as Madeline, because I had no idea about this particular survey and report that had been put together. But hey ho, we had the answer for that from Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think we all would like to say thank you for everything. You've kept the show on the road, haven't you, for people? And I know for the people I look after, just being able to get to the supermarket is so important, even if they're not supposed to be going out. But
well, it is thanks to all of the schemes,
Yeah.
We've all done our bit. Yeah, thank you.
Have I got any quick questions? I can't see any hands. Just shout out if you've got a question. It's probably easier. No? Wonderful. Okay, so next up we've got Madeline Sumner, the County Council. I'll hand over to Maddie.
Yes, hello. I'm just giving a little update about transport on behalf of the County Council. And as most of you know, I'm the Community Transport Development Officer with the County Council, and that is a demonstration of how the authority is fully supportive of the community transport network in the county. I work with all the schemes and assist them in their development, and we work together under the consortium to address issues, look at volunteer recruitment, look at additional funding, look at the needs and the gaps, and try and address all those. We've got a network throughout the whole county, which we're very, very proud of. The County Council also offers a grant to support community transport every year, and thank goodness that has been maintained for the coming year, and that is administered by one of the schemes, and it provides a small amount of funding to those organisations who have signed up to it. And it also means that the County Council can work with the community transport schemes that are part of it to look at issues that affect the whole county. And one of the things that David said was the 0300 number. You know, we can work with those schemes to provide and improve access and to deal with specific issues that the sector is facing. Obviously, this has been an unprecedented year, but what has been the overriding thing for me is how all CT has continued to operate and diversify, and it means that they're in extremely a good place regarding addressing the sort of fallout and recovery from this whole epidemic, in that, as David said, there have been phone calls being made, befriending and checking on their client group who are in the vulnerable categories, making sure they're all right. I know schemes that have actually encouraged clients to go out just for a drive. They're not going anywhere in particular, but just to help them to meet somebody, to talk to their driver in a safe environment and to get out of the house. And I really believe that this whole area will be absolutely vital over the next year or two when we're looking at recovery. And the CT schemes are incredibly well placed to assist those people with their extra kind, supportive and knowledgeable offer that they have. And people who will have been isolated for long periods will undoubtedly have lost confidence and will perhaps be suffering more mentally and physically as a result of this extended lockdown. So, you know, again, CT is incredibly well placed, and as one of them uses for their strapline, I think it's you, David, more than just the journey, which is very true. It's so much more than just providing the transport. And you know, I'm feeding into the loneliness plan and numerous other plans and policies that are being worked on, where we can feed in that vital information about how we can assist people's health and well-being moving forward. So another demonstration of how the CT sector goes that extra mile and is so much more involved than just transport, although of course that's absolutely vital. Just to say, on as far as the County Council is concerned, many of you will know that there was a passenger transport strategy approved a year last November, and that was going to look at area by area across the county, looking at all the transport that is delivered on behalf of the County Council and passenger transport more widely, unsubsidised services, and look at how they could be consolidated, improved, where gaps could be filled, where communities could play a greater role in that provision. We were starting with Wychavon last year, but because of lockdown and everything else, that has been delayed, but that is on the cards this year, looking at the whole of Wychavon and all the transport provision in Wychavon. Malvern Hills will follow, and that could be towards the end of this year. So there will be consultations. We will be looking at public transport, both subsidised and commercial, and transport to education, adult social care, looked after children, special schools, all that stuff that the County Council is involved in. So that will be a big piece of work, and we really hope that we can look at that in this coming year as things start to, as people start to get out and about more and people are able to move more freely again. The County Council has also been able to maintain its contract payments to all its contractors throughout this period, whether they're operating contracts or not. And this is an essential thing that they've done in order to ensure that those operators are still there at the end of this. If they hadn't have had money coming in, if payments hadn't have been made, we risk losing a lot of operators. And with something like, please don't minute it, but it could be like 14,000 people a day transported, including all the school children. It's massive numbers that we're talking about, and we want to make sure those operators will be there to continue to provide those services once they're able to do so. So that offer has been maintained throughout. That's it from me for the County Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anyone got any questions there they want to shout out now? No? Wonderful. Thank you ever so much, Madeline. It just flagged up to me as well that this is about, you know, isolation, about getting everyone, you know, out and about. But also we've got here today with us Matthew, who's our youth chairperson, and also someone from the young person's cabinet. And I think it's important that they're listening in, because this isn't just about older people, it's about everyone in the community. And I'm hoping that they'll be able to come up with some solutions for getting people to apprenticeships, getting to school, getting to clubs, isn't it, you know, in the rural areas. So I'm relying on you two to help us with that. So moving on.
So, Sarah?
Yes?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute before. I was having problems, basically. Can I just come back with a very quick question to Madeline, please?
Of course you can.
Is that all right?
Of course.
Thank you very much. Madeline, nice to see you again via
Hi,
Zoom.
Julian.
Hi. Thanks for the update, particularly regarding the public transport study, the counties and the Wychavon area, and the progress on that, sadly, which has been delayed by COVID, as so much has been. You know. It's a very local thing in some ways, but we've been trying to get county council involvement in a couple of things in Pershore. Specifically, you'll be aware of the Pershore Plumline service, which is a fantastic service. It's almost like a social gathering. To a certain extent, that's been lost in the present thing, but people meet their friends on the bus. It's a purely round town service, runs about an hourly basis. Under threat before. Fortunately, it's now being extended to July this year, but it's on the present timetable. And our point, we've been trying to make this for some time, and I understand it is under review, but is the fact that it's not maybe serving people it ought to be. It's basically, the times hasn't changed about 5 years now. It's missing out a lot of the new developments in the northern part of the town, and as well as the train connections. It doesn't really connect with any of the trains, even though it passes the station on a regular basis. It's things like that where what we need actually is that service. It is a popular service. Times of day it's not well used. The timetable could be improved so that it does serve those potential new markets, serve the trains better, and be better for all, because it would guarantee its continuance after July, which is really, really important. It's things like that, and more minor things, like we've been trying for some time to get the bus stop moved. It's at the top of the station drive, very busy, regular traffic, turn down to the station, HGVs, everything, limited visibility over the railway bridge. It's a very small thing. All we've asked for is that bus stop flag, which is hidden from view in a privet hedge most of the year, to be moved down the road. Safety consideration there for people using it, but also that part of the road, there's a sloping pavement and the raised pavement for people with visually impaired situations, you know. So it's a very minor point to make, but it's getting the county council. We tried for a site meeting well before COVID, and we can't seem to get one. I mean, you've got the ear of the county. I mean, if some of these smaller things were sorted or could be sorted, it would be a whole lot better for the users of those services. Sorry, I've gone on a bit.
That's all right. Well, I'll leave Madeline to come back to you with that one. Otherwise, we'll be talking about. I was going to say, did you want to do it privately, or you can do it now if you want? But then, whatever's easiest.
Yeah, I'll certainly follow it up privately with you, Julian. But just to say, I think a lot of it was just put on the back of this delay with the review, and certainly the Pershore Plumline would be involved in the review. But now you've raised it, I will take that up with the relevant people.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Get that sign out of that hedge. That'd be wonderful. Right. Thank you, everyone.
Sarah?
Yes.
Sarah, sorry, it's Trudy.
Yes.
Can I just ask a quick question of Madeline? Hi, Maddie.
Hello.
Good to see you. Can we be involved in the discussions around the consultations in terms of Hereford and Worcester Health and Care Trust, because it might help in terms of some of the restoration and all the things that are going on around there. So I don't know if it will, but it might, you know, it might be helpful to sort of be involved with, have some of that information that we could share.
So that's about public or transport services, is it?
Transport, yeah, because
yeah.
it might, you know, have some sort of, there might be things that we could do to make life a little bit easier, or, you know, things that would be helpful to know about in terms of some of the restoration that's going on, you know, restoring health services and things like that.
Yeah, it's a very valid point, and I think perhaps the connection between transport and health and you know, that whole area has perhaps not been something that has happened so much in the past, but I think it really ought to be you know, joint discussions as we plan services in the future, for those reasons I mentioned earlier, that, you know, it's as much about getting someone to the shops because they need food, but as much about for their own health and well-being, to make that journey, as Julian referred to, you know, it's like a club going on the plumb line, and as any community transport service operator knows, you know, it is just the opportunity of people getting together. So that's a very important connection to make. Thank you.
Sure. And I think if as services are being restored and sort of being looked at in terms of what the need are, those conversations will be useful to have, because, you know, something might not work because of the transport issue, or so it'd be good to sort of have those conversations, really.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Great. Linking up health and transport has got to be the way to go forward, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Now we're going to move on to something that I'm very passionate about, and that's the Good Neighbour scheme and the Good Neighbour networks. So we've got Claire Thomas and Helen Gray. Are you there and ready?
This is Claire, yes.
Wonderful.
Yes,
Away you go.
I've also got, or should be on the call somewhere, is Fiona Petts, who I'd like to introduce you to in a minute, who is the new Good Neighbour Network coordinator in Malvern. But I will just spend literally a minute just talking about where we've got to now, if I may. The Good Neighbour Network came out of, as Amanda has said, the recognition that community transport is much more than transport, as everybody's been saying. It's working with people in so many more ways, and a certain COVID, boy, has that proved it. And also the recognition that it's about asset-based working, and especially with regards to volunteers. So the original plans, which are still valid for the Good Neighbour Network, and all this started just pre-lockdown, where the Good Neighbour Network would be in two parts. The first would be to deliver local information service. That would be to recruit volunteers from their local communities, in their local communities, to provide information not only on Age UK services, but all the other services in their local communities, and really to signpost to other agencies, and also to be the link with community groups, community transport, etc. And then from there, the second part of the Good Neighbour Network was, and if I had the second slide, that'd be great, to really map the assets that already existed in the local communities, and work in partnership with those groups and support the all the local groups that were in those communities. And be a link to community transport and other ticket to ride opportunities. In actual fact, what happened because of COVID was those two things were completely reversed. And what happened in March was that all those groups sprang up around local neighbourhoods at parish levels. And Anwen Jones, who many of you will know, who was a Good Neighbour Network coordinator at the time, certainly spent her time working with those groups, linking volunteers to the groups and supporting them where she could, with resources, and also setting up a steering group. So that is where we are now in terms of Good Neighbour Network. There are also now two parts to it, one in Malvern and one in Wychhaven, which Helen will talk about. So we are at the situation where started to support those groups and to set up a steering group, really to make the local groups that sprung up through COVID and before that more sustainable. And I would like to pass you on to Fiona, who's there somewhere, just to talk about her thoughts of taking it forward. Fiona, are you there?
Hello, can you see
You
me?
are.
Hello everyone. Hello. Thanks Claire. Yeah, I'm so pleased to be working on the Good Neighbour Network and listening in about what's going on with the progress with Ticket to Ride as well. It's really really interesting to listen to, and I'm really excited to see the links between both. But yeah, just a bit of a to let you know what we're focusing on. Claire's kind of mentioned some of it, but yeah, so at the moment we're really supporting steering groups to help take them forward in this time. We're trying to increase sustainability with our existing Good Neighbour Network volunteer groups, and also trying to bridge the gaps or the needs and services that they need, including information about transport schemes and provision that is available for them. And yeah, I just believe that this telling them about the transport schemes is really going to positively impact the network groups. Really going to be focusing on expanding and reaching other rural areas to create new groups across the district. And just to let you know, we are running 2 projects as part of Age UK, Worcester and Malvern Hills, which I really believe is going to complement and link in with Good Neighbour Network. I'm just going to touch on them a little bit. So the first, so both of them have, like I said, potential to really complement them. And the idea is to strengthen the connection between communities and bring the different ages together through these 2 new projects. It offers creative opportunities and companionship, and the aim is to tackle loneliness and isolation, but to increase physical activity levels within an individual, in a neighbourhood, but also as a community. One is called Creative Friends and the other is called Minute Your Moves. And again, linking in with the transport and provision that is available, it could really impact and enhance these projects that we have. But really looking forward to working with you all. And if you want to know more information about what we're up to, we're really happy to share that with you.
Thank you. And I'm really excited about working with you now I've met you. Helen, I think, is next up.
Hello, hi. As you all probably know, there are 3 volunteer centres come CVSs across the Wychavon patch. We offer a variety of direct services, including our famous community transport schemes, which are more than just a door-to-door service. They're also a holistic support. As anyone who contacts us, we spend a lot of time talking to them to see if they need any other help, so that we can find out if we can signpost them somewhere, or even if it's just for them to ring us up the next day saying that they've forgotten to ring us, and just give them a chat for half an hour or so. Pershore and Evesham, that does happen quite a lot, I've noticed actually. Pershore and Evesham are quite rural patches, Droitwich less so, but it has its own quirks. And one of our main core functions is facilitating volunteering. The name really says it all, doesn't it? A volunteer centre. And we do that by advising, recruiting and guiding volunteers to roles that suit them. And of course, volunteering has a huge impact on the individual that wants to volunteer, by helping with confidence, making new friends, adding to a CV, learning new skills, and also getting that feel-good factor back, which obviously in the current climate we have today is extremely important for mental health. The Good Neighbour Network is very much a grassroots level scheme, and it builds on and complements the work that we did, the 3 Wychavon volunteer centres did about 12 years ago, when we employed a community development worker who mapped the villages to find out what groups and what activities were going on there, and also to identify any gaps. From this work, we have been able to continue with the identification of where to gain the knowledge: pubs, post offices, village shops, parish councils, village halls, churches, parish mags, and the schools. So we have got quite a good idea of the groups and the needs within each village. Also now with social media being what it is, and it wasn't back then, it's also keeping an eye on the village Facebook groups. We have identified village champions or area champions in the case of Droitwich, and we're in regular contact with them to get updates as to what is happening, identify gaps, and look to find ways to facilitate filling them. Regular contact with all the groups is also on our agenda. We offer advice and resources and training should it be required. They're also useful to help identify newcomers to the villages or areas who may need assistance, so vulnerable people get flagged up to us fairly quickly. And with all the new builds that are springing up in many of the villages, we look to promote groups and what is available locally for them to join in or volunteer with the aim to provide more help to them and also to the older villagers. The main aim is really to provide sustainable groups within the areas to aid village cohesiveness and enable them to cope in emergency situations. And you've only got to look at what we've just experienced, as well as the localised flooding, to know that this is all very, very important. 12 years ago, we were amazed at how little one village knew about its next door neighbour village. And we strove to address this by putting villages into geographical clusters and facilitating meetings between them, and also facilitating contact between similar groups within different villages so that they could share good practice and get good ideas. This still carries on. And also, I think it's very important to realise that, especially with the emergency situations that we're facing, the almost annual localised flooding, many villages actually depend on volunteers to alleviate such emergencies and help the local people of the village. And it's something that all three centres of us intend to continue with our volunteering efforts in which way we can.
Thank you. You're all doing wonderful things. We'll move straight on now to Amanda Smith and Caitlin, who are going to talk us through the Ticket to Ride Fund. And oh no, we're not. Sorry, I've missed someone out. Nick, I've missed out digital connectivity for the transport.
That's
Are
no
you
problem,
there, Nick?
Sarah.
Sorry.
I am here. That's okay. Hi, welcome everybody to my first meeting. Thank you. That's an introduction to the Wild Things Network. I should say who I am. I advise community businesses, so village shops, village pubs, social enterprises, cooperatives across Herefordshire and in Worcestershire. And as part of that role, one of the things that we've been doing is looking at building back better in the future and the platforms that we need in order to be able to get communities to be able to take advantage of certainly digital in the future as a way of designing and delivering services. So the Wild Things Network is there as a proposal that we're looking to put in some funding for to pilot a scheme, basically putting in what's called a low radio wireless access network in village halls across a certain district of Worcestershire. And that will be an autonomous, independent, low-cost, low-power digital rural network. And those are the kind of things that are already being deployed by farming communities and by agricultural businesses, but also by logistics companies. It's a collaborative, community-owned digital platform for the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is something that we're all increasingly becoming aware of as we talk to things like our Siri devices and Alexas and Google Home Hubs and everything else. And the Internet of Things is a real opportunity for us to provide people with digital access without them actually even having to think about it. It's an unconscious way of doing that. And that's come out of some of the work we've done through the Digital Access Project and the My Home Helper project that we've been rolling out with older people in particular to combat isolation and loneliness, is that many of them have needed access to very simple to use technology, which is a tablet-based device, but it is simply a sort of touch screen and you touch the buttons and things happen. And that level of automation certainly makes it much more accessible for people who are either vulnerable or elderly or who don't have access to high-speed broadband or mobile phone networks. And the benefit of LoRaWAN technology is it is open source. There's lots of interoperability, so it can cut across lots of different organizations and platforms with these global operating standards. So it's a little bit like Bluetooth in the sense that the standard is there, but you can use it for lots of different purposes. It's secure and it's accessible because of its low cost, but also the fact that you don't actually need to do very much with it. There's a lot of automation based built in to the network. It's flexible and scalable and adaptable and reliable. And that's the kind of advantages that meant it's been rolled out in places like Russia and America and Canada and Australia, areas which are huge geographical distances, but it provides a local network. And whilst we don't have those kind of spaces to contend with, certainly do have issues around capacity. And so we're putting in a bid to Comic Relief, the Paul Hamlin Build Fund for a proof of concept bid, and that should happen from the 12th of February. Could I have the next slide? So I think we all know how much we've become dependent upon the internet, and certainly lockdowns have proved that. And it's unfortunate to some extent that the internet is becoming full. And the same thing really with our mobile networks and 5G. And certainly rural communities have had the raw end of the deal when it's come to the rollout of high-speed broadband and certainly fiber to the premises. And 4G services are still very patchy, and 5G services are less likely to be rolled out into rural communities as quickly as they are into urban areas. And without an alternative to that, rural communities are going to remain digitally deprived and disadvantaged in comparison with those metropolitan urban centres. And the Wild Things Network aims to create this viable, affordable and reliable alternative network that has community ownership of the data and a co-production of services. And I think that very much matches what is happening with something like Tim Berners-Lee, who essentially created the World Wide Web, who has now recognized that we need an alternative for that. And if you want to have a look at his INRUPT innovative network, that is certainly looking at much better control of the data than just simply handing that over to people like Facebook and Google and Amazon that we have no real influence over. Could we have the next slide? So these commercial LoRaWAN networks are already deployed in across the globe, and there's quite a few case studies and examples of in particular, with the exception of these agricultural deployments in rural areas and transport logistics in terms of tracking assets. And there is limited development of community transport and health and social care services deployed there. So at the moment, mostly it is agricultural, but we think there is a real opportunity here and to get ahead of this curve on rural service provision. So that's where hopefully not only the voluntary and community sector generally will be able to use a LoRaWAN network as a platform to develop their own products and services, but also for things like community transport to interact and to connect with lots of other services in a seamless way. I think we've all heard about how we would love to see seamless provision, and I think many of us who've missed a bus or missed a train or everything else would really appreciate the ability to actually hold something back or be able to call things up to know how you could interconnect more quickly between services. So hopefully the network will make those kind of things possible in rural areas to connect up different services. So if we could have our next slide. So the application is ready to go, and it would see the deployment of 25 LoRaWAN beacon transmitters at village halls, which are very well located to cover a rural community because they're all about 5 or 6 miles away from each other, and they are a good mesh network. And we're engaged with Cooperative Web, an organisation who develop digital services and can provide technical support to organisations developing apps and products and services to that. And Community First is we are engaged with the voluntary community sector digital access group, and we hope that as a result of the pilots that we're doing with things like My Home Helper and Amica 24, and with whom we're working with Age UK and Simply Limitless and Worcestershire Community Trust and various other organisations, that as a result of the learning from those pilots, they can result in new products and services that communities can develop for themselves. And so there is great potential there for the health and social care services, community transport coordination, monitoring, asset tracking, home security and safety monitoring services, environmental and waste management, but particularly home automation and Internet of Things connectivity, that certainly over the next 5 to 10 years will revolutionise the way in which rural communities operate together and function in a way that we couldn't have predicted from the creation of 4G and similarly 5G, but also as it comes online, the grid as a replacement for the internet. So it's about filling in gaps, really. And we think there's a real opportunity there to create sustainable income streams from the hosting, subscription and advertising revenues from launching those products and services on that platform. So I think that probably comes to the end of that bit of our thoughts around that, and we'd be very happy to answer your questions now, or certainly for organisations that are thinking about the future, not only delivery but communications, how potentially they could work with something like the Wild Things Network to configure their services for the Internet of Things.
Thank you, Nick. It's fascinating. I especially like it's called Wild Things. I don't know why. It just sounds great, doesn't it? Sounds like it's a bit of fun. So has anyone got any questions? It is difficult for me to see you, so if you'd just like to speak up now. No? I can't see anyone waving at me. You've got away lightly, Nick, but they've got all your details there.
You've got our contact details, so certainly if you would like to get in touch, as we certainly with the Digital Access Project, if you'd like to become involved in that, and as a result of that then get some thinking around developing social enterprises or services from community transport that can feed in from that. So the next people who want to create connected autonomous vehicle fleets of vehicles in rural areas for freight and passenger services, then get in touch with us, because the Wild Things Network will be the platform on which you can connect all those things to. So
wonderful. I rather like those things you can get your takeaways delivered in those little robotic boxes, but I think it's going to be a while before they get to licensing.
That's right.
Well,
drones. You might not get a little robot rumbling through your village, but you'll certainly get an Amazon drone landing in your back garden.
Dropping my takeaway off. Wonderful. Can't wait.
Yeah.
Thank you ever so much. Okay, I think we will pass on then. This time we really will pass on to Amanda and Caitlin.
Thanks, Sarah. I think I've just acknowledged that in the chat we all got a bit excited about how we ensure that we engage with children and young people. So I think, Nick, that's maybe why you got away with any questions.
Yes, sorry about that.
But yeah, we'll pick that. We'll ensure that there's continues to be a comprehensive approach about how we engage with children and young people. Absolutely, they're not a lost voice, and they're certainly part of our solution. But to sort of paint the picture in terms of our Ticket to Ride fund, it's probably worth knowing that since the pandemic, there's been a 500% increase in civil crowdfunding projects across the UK as communities, councils and businesses come together to help places to get through the crisis. And that was part of the sort of Build Back Better campaign, which had a hashtag. Everything has a hashtag these days, doesn't it? And then there was, some of you may recall that there was a report commissioned by the Prime Minister to look at ways of funding sustainable community spirit beyond the sort of lockdown. And it was recommended that a national civic crowdfunding platform was created. And that idea was proposed actually by Speyside themselves early in the summer. So the fact that that's led to central backing, I think, is testimony to them, but also proof in the pudding that Malvern and Wychavon are ahead of the time in terms of putting this in place. And I think, it's very much about how we support that integrated investment in sustainable and innovative transport solutions, and what role we play as district councils in terms of supporting that. What's come across for me this afternoon, and it continues to do so in terms of how long I've had relationships with community transport providers, is that they're an absolutely fabulous service that they provide to the community. So it's about how we can support them to best effect to make sure that they can not only sustain what they do, but actually amplify it in terms of meeting some of those health and social care needs. So for that funding, there is £150,000 allocated to Malvern's Ticket to Ride Fund and £140,000 allocated to Whitchavens. And the reason why there's £10,000 less is because 10k was allocated to another community transport project in the district. And it's a maximum of 50% funding or £50,000, depending on which is greater. I think probably what's also worth adding is that since we've launched this, we've managed to get the county council on board. So we've got a crowdfund Worcestershire, and the county have invested £85,000 as part of their Healthier Communities pot, of which that's focusing on social isolation, befriending, maintaining that volunteer offer post, healthier communities. Now, all of those strands, community transport providers absolutely contribute towards. So there's an opportunity for a further 25% funding through the county's part. And we've had really good evidence of collaborative funding with the county council and the district council to support a whole raft of projects during this pandemic. And I'm sure that Caitlin will be able to tell you a bit more. So over to you, Caitlin.
Great, thanks Amanda. So yeah, I'm Caitlin, I'm from Space Hive, a partnerships director there, and I've been working with the councils to basically develop what is now called the Crowdfund Worcestershire programme. So I'm just going to share my screen so you can see my slides. Hopefully they've popped up for you. Great. So yes, it's been really good to be here today to hear a bit about what's been happening already with community transport in the area, but also what your future ambitions are. And so, as Amanda said, the district's pioneered the programme, and we started off with a transport focus. And since the coronavirus crisis, we have expanded the programme across the county, and there's multiple funds on the platform available for you to tap into. More on that in a moment. We will be covering in this session a little bit more about who Space Hive are, what it is that we do, and how we're here to support you, and also cover off what the programme is, how you can get involved, the key dates and so on. But also I want to spend a fair chunk of time going through some project creator success stories, both to inspire, but also to bring to life exactly what it is we're talking about today. And then I'll give you all an invite to our upcoming project creator workshops in March. And then hopefully we'll have a bit of time to hear about your own ideas. So if you do want to share at the end, let me know, but also I'm happy to take any questions as well. So first up, what is crowdfunding? So it really is all about someone starting with an idea for how they want to improve their local area. So once they've come up with that idea, it's hard to make something happen on your own, and crowdfunding enables people to draw upon a crowd of people, organisations, whether that's local businesses, the council, and their friends, family, neighbours, to help make that idea happen and bring it to life. So on Space Hive, that can mean all sorts of things. So we're really interested in projects that bring local places to life, whether that's a water slide down a high street for the day, community-led ideas, so ideas that are from the community, for the community, places that people love and are proud to be part of, and also places that are distinctive and reflect the character and the personality of the local people that live there. So you can see there the bridge to the Crystal Palace dinosaurs. That bridge has now been installed, I'm pleased to say. So now if you do want to go and see the Victorian interpretation of dinosaurs in Crystal Palace, you can. So it's all about transforming a space and improving the local area for people that live there. So Space Hive mission is to create a world where anyone can shape their local area by creating places that make people happy, proud and prosperous. And now, as Amanda mentioned, this has taken on a whole new relevance over the last 12 months. We've seen a fivefold increase in the number of people coming forward with ideas to support their area. So it really is an unprecedented level of community action, and we're really proud to be able to support communities at this time. So what does a typical crowdfunding campaign look like? It's not only about raising the funds you need, but about getting as many people as possible to come behind your project and back that change. So typically you start off with a smaller, those smaller pledges. So it could be from as little as £2. Anyone can chip in. And once you're able to showcase that support, that's when you're going to start to get those bigger backers coming in, hopefully including the council, or more on that in a moment. But all the while you're still promoting your project, whether that's online or offline, to try and attract people to come onto the platform and back your idea. So on Space Hive projects, particularly when they get a pledge from a partner, obviously the county council and the district councils being one, they have an 85% chance of going on to hit their target, which is an industry high. So there's no other platform in the UK where you can achieve that level of success. And that in part is due to the unique partnership we have with the council. We've got human beings who are here to support you to go the distance, and we can link you in with other projects who have done similar things across the UK, or perhaps in your area as well. So the average raise on Space Hive is about £10,000, but we've had everything from £100 for a lick of paint for a building, up to £250,000 raised for a major regeneration project. So it's still helpful to keep in mind the average, and I'll show you some examples later with different amounts that have been raised. The average campaign duration, so how long it takes someone to start their campaign, go live, start asking for pledges, to actually hitting the target, is 10 weeks. So really anything from 2 to 3 months, and you don't want to go for much longer than that. Oh, frog, sorry, because it really is about that momentum behind your campaign and that sense of urgency you create. So in terms of eligibility, your project should basically not be a private project, so it should have a community benefit. So you're not going to be crowdfunding for your own car, but you could crowdfund for a vehicle that's going to support people locally to get from A to B. There should be projects in their own right. So rather than saying we need £20,000 to purchase this vehicle, but we're going to just raise £10,000, that wouldn't be a project, because you need to be able to deliver what you've set out for your backers. So whilst it is possible to break your project down into different parts, whatever you've set out on your project page, you need to make sure what you've promised your backers you're going to be able to deliver on. So it's all about really tangible projects that can be delivered once the funding target is met. It could be something temporary like that water slide I showed you, or something permanent like a bridge to some dinosaurs. The main thing is it's an idea that people want to see happen locally, because if that's the case, they're going to get behind you and help you hit your target. And so I think it's also really good to think about why we might want to crowdfund opposed to applying to grants or other methods of raising funds. The first thing to say is that crowdfunding on Space Hive doesn't preclude any of those options. So you can still do your classic bucket shaking and apply to grants. All of those can be fed into your campaign. It's more about showing all the support you've got for your project in one place, with a view to using that to support, to encourage others to get behind you as well. I suppose the main difference is that you're going public with the idea before you've necessarily got the funding to make it happen. And so this can feel slightly different to perhaps filling in a grant form that nobody will see or be any the wiser of if you get a yes or a no until your project's delivered. So it's about going out there, raising awareness of what you want to achieve, and getting people behind you. So naturally, the outcome of that is that you are bringing people together. Projects on Space Hive, the average is 75 backers, so that's 75 people, organisations behind your idea that want to help make it happen. You know, raising awareness of what you're doing for the project, but also your organisation, can really help your project to access new funders that you haven't tapped into before, and also new volunteers and so on, who could actually then be available to help you deliver the project too. It can be a way of getting it done quicker. So obviously there's a time frame as part of this programme, but if you know you need to raise a lot of funding fast, popping a project on Space Hive and going for it can be a really great way to raise funds quickly. But also, of course, you are creating a sense of ownership over the project. And so people are literally investing, whether it's a £5 or £500 in your project and supporting you. So you will find that you have this big crowd of supporters who want the best for you. So when thinking about crowdfunding, of course, you get the funding, but you also get the crowd. And so, I really want to introduce you to Crowdfund Worcestershire. That's the programme that we launched last year in response to the pandemic, and it's gone from strength to strength. So it really provides a platform for projects across the county to actually showcase what they're doing, and tied into that is a package of support from funding from the council, but also additional resource from the Space Hive team to provide extra tips and advice on how to run a really good crowdfunding campaign. So to date, there's been 47 projects across the county who have raised over £250,000 between them, and that's from over 1,500 people, organisations, different backers, including the council. It's been really, really fantastic to see, and there's a wealth of inspiration. If you want to visit the Crowdfund Worcestershire page, you can do so via that link, or simply search for it on your preferred search engine, and you can find out a bit more about what people have been up to in your area. So do click onto the projects tab and take a look. Loads of really inspiring examples, and I'd really like to dive into some of those now, both in terms of what's been happening in the county, but also for transport across Space Hive. But before I do, I think it's worth mentioning the extra support that we have. So there will be workshops in March. I'll share the dates with you at the end, so you can pop those in your diaries if you want to attend, learn a little bit more about how it all works. But also you can contact us at any time, support@spacehive.com. I'll share that at the end, and you can tap into additional support from the Space Hive team. So the funds, which Amanda has already mentioned, are available on the platform, and by creating your project on Space Hive, you will be matched to these projects by virtue of being in the right area. So it's all done for you, no paper involved whatsoever, which you'll probably be pleased to hear, because I'm sure many of you no longer have access to printers like me. So you can go onto the platform, create your project, and if the funds are relevant to you, you can pitch to them directly through the platform. So as Amanda said, there's really good links between the Ticket to Ride projects and also the County Council's wider fund as part of the programme. So between both those funds, you could receive up to 75% of your crowdfunding target. So you'd be looking to raise at least 25% of the project value before you can go on to hit your target. So do bear that in mind. We're here with you to help you plan your crowdfunding campaign and have the best chance of success that you can have. So do take a look at the funds available on the platform via the same link. There's much more information about them and what the requirements are. I'll go through now the timeline of the programme, so you've got all the dates. So on the 2nd and 11th of March, we're running a longer workshop session for projects across the county. So there'll be a bit more information about the programme, and then you've got until the 21st of April to upload your project onto Spacehive, and also pitch to the fund, which will be matched to automatically. You then go through the verification process. So we work with an organisation called Locality. You may be familiar with them, and they're going to be looking at your project, checking the costs, basically making sure if you go on to hit your target, you can indeed go on and deliver the project as it's outlined. So once verified, you can launch your campaign. As I've already said, you can crowdfund 2 to 3 months. You might be able to do it quicker if you need to. And the council's typically looking at projects and pledging, if successful, around 6 weeks after the deadline date. So we'll tell you exactly when your project will be reviewed. The dates may vary from the district councils to the county council. But the key thing to note here is that the council are going to be looking at not only the criteria for the funds and whether your project idea meets that, but also the support that you've amassed from your community, and how many people have got behind you to back the project and help you make it happen. So that's why they give you that longer time frame to start with your campaign and showcase that support. So you'll then go on and hit your targets in the summer, probably by July. Obviously, if you need any advice on when to set your campaign targets, just let us know. If this isn't the right time frame for you, you want to wait a bit longer or plan your project over the summer, the next deadline will be in autumn this year, usually around September. But it's never too late to get in touch, too early to get in touch. So do say hello and we can start working with you to shape up your project and get your crowdfunding campaign plan underway. So first up, in terms of success stories, I'd really love to share this Age UK project in Hammersmith and Fulham, which is a London borough not too far from me. And so this was an amazing project, and they amassed loads of backers. I mentioned the average is 75 on Spacehive, and raised a very large sum of cash. A lot of this was through the platform, but also they did some offline fundraising as well, and then showed that on the page. But if technology permits, I'd really love to show you a video that they did. Okay, I'm sharing my sound. I'll play a couple of videos for you. Obviously, the sound on the video might influence how loudly it blasts through your speakers, so feel free to adjust as we go. So the great thing about this project is typically pledges for projects come from a 1.5 mile radius. They're local projects, are local people, mostly they're relevant to the local people that they are looking to serve. But in this case, the story really captured the hearts and minds of people across the city, because it was really relevant to the crisis. And more of us than ever before have been really acutely aware of what it's like to be isolated in your own home and unable to go and see family and friends. So hopefully this works. Let's see. So they managed to get a video on ITV News, which I'll play you here, which really helped to direct people to the campaign.
It's hard to imagine how a minibus could have such a big impact on somebody's life. But for 87-year-old Lillian, it's what keeps her going. In every sense. Once every 2 weeks, it takes her to the shops, the only time she leaves her home.
Well, I love it. I absolutely love it. And we're going Friday, thank the Lord. And, well, I can't wait for Friday. I mean, I've been in my flat all week, or the fortnight, and I'm out. And the freedom, it's the freedom of seeing something different and know that I'm going to enjoy it. And to me, it's a new life. For them few hours, it's freedom.
As well as taking you shopping, the bus also takes you on trips, is that right?
Took us last year, they took us to Hastings for the day. It was quite enjoyable, yeah. Mind you, a bit of a dump, Well, I couldn't get down. I couldn't get down to the sea.
But those journeys are now at risk. The Hammersmith and Fulham Age UK minivan is 12 years old and doesn't meet ultra-low emission zone standards, so will soon be too expensive to operate. They need £66,000 for a new one.
It really is a lifeline, and I don't want it to go. I really don't. I couldn't get a taxi to go up to the shops. I couldn't. By the time you've had your pension, pay your rent, you've got nothing left. If I hadn't got the bus to look forward to it, I think I'd give up. I think I would. I mean, I've lost my family, and if I hadn't got the bus, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go. It's something, you know, you look forward to it.
Lillian was widowed 13 years ago. Her children have all passed away, her daughter last year from cancer. It is on the bus that she gets to see familiar faces and feel part of the community. Because of coronavirus, Hammersmith and Fulham Age UK have struggled to hold events and open their charity shops, so they are trying to online crowdfund a new minivan. For Lillian, through months of lockdown, there was one thing that pulled her through: the thought of being back on the bus.
Bye-bye, darling. God bless.
Sam Holder, ITV News.
Great, so hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of a transport project that we've had on the platform, and how they use their story of you know, the funding they needed to raise to gain traction and
it's hard to imagine
awareness of their project and direct people to their page. On that ITV News page, they actually have a link to their Spacehive page, where they can direct people to pledge. And we were like, what's going on? Why is there so many pledges suddenly going on to this project? And sure enough, we found out about the coverage that they'd had. Next up is a homegrown project. I suppose it would have been, over a year ago now, we ran a programme with Arts Council England to fund youth, children and young people music projects. And one came forward from Worcestershire, and it was Worcestershire's Travelling Music Box. So when we launched the Crowdfund Worcestershire programme, we had the creators, Deb and Min, come and talk to us. So I have a copy of the video. So I'll just play that for you now. Again, the sound might be a little bit different, but hopefully if you adjust your settings, it should come through okay. There it is. My home internet doesn't seem to be able to cope with that one, but we have got the video, so we can make sure we link you to that YouTube link, and then we can send it round as well. So yeah, we'll share that with you so you can have a look afterwards. But the main thing to say is that it was a really, really successful campaign, and Deb and Min have got some really fantastic tips to basically show what can work in the area, but what it takes to create a really exciting crowdfunding campaign, and go beyond the usual suspects. If you want to, for example, get people to support you who perhaps haven't heard of your organisation or haven't been involved in your work before, perhaps won't directly benefit from the work that it is that you're doing, this is a really great case study for that. So next up, I want to share with you yes, I should say Deb and Min are planning to come back for more at some point. So yeah, we may see them as part of the programme in the coming year. Time will tell. And also this lovely little travelling music box is a really fun way of capturing what they were trying to do with the project, which is basically raise funds for a van to be able to transport musical instruments across more rural parts of the county, and bring music provision to young people everywhere. So they actually worked with a illustrator from the local university and got them to create this design, which they turned into a box to raise funds for. So it was really visual, really fun, and really like captured people's imaginations. Next up, this one, because I assumed Ticket to Ride is a pun from a popular Beatles song, I thought it would be remiss not to have a project from our programme in Liverpool. So this is a project called Liverpool 8 Cycle of Life, and it's by Blue River Support Services. And basically, this was in response to the need for transport provision for NHS workers, to provide a safe and fast free route for them to get to work during the crisis. So it was an inner city hub that basically provided free cycles to NHS workers and key workers. And I think the thing that really struck me about this project was on the page itself, they had people who had received the bikes and were able to comment about how much the project had made a difference to them. And this is one of the nice things about the Space Hive platform. Your project isn't just for fundraising, you can use it to cultivate your crowd in the future. So if you hit your target, your page will stay there for all of eternity, and you can use it to message your crowd, the people that have backed you, but also showcase the impact you've had from that project. And this is very, very helpful if you want to then come back and crowdfund for the next phase of your project or do another project. So that was a case with Bikeworks CIC. So they had a project to amongst older members of the community across several boroughs in London. So with this first campaign, they were purchasing several, I think it was 3 of these bikes, which basically are electric assisted side-by-side bikes. So it's almost like 2 carriages, so 4 people can go in this almost train of bikes. And it basically provides an alternative free taxi service for local people. And they consider it a pedal-powered dial-a-ride. So it's enabled people to book the service for journeys up to 1.5 hours, and they can go shopping, visit friends, or simply just, as Madeline mentioned earlier, it's so important to leave the house and get some gentle exercise. So pedaling is optional because they all have a pilot who will cycle the bike for them, help them carry shopping. But if they want to, they can simply go for a gentle ride and take in some of the surroundings. So it's a really lovely project, and one the council got behind, but also they raised funds, as you can see with the thumbs up sticker, for this project in March last year. Obviously, when they started the campaign, who could have predicted what was going to happen this year? And then they came back later to actually fund a 4th bike, and you can see them here in the video with their masks on, their shields, and they've been providing services for people who need to get out and about during the past 6 months or so. So it's been a real lifeline for lots of people who otherwise wouldn't have been able to leave their house. And yeah, really, really inspiring. If you do want to go on and see it in action, you can visit this project page and click the video you can see there, and see them pedaling around. It's quite something to behold. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of the kinds of transport projects we've had on the platform. And so I just want to also take a moment to potentially hear from people what their ideas might be, but also see if you have any questions for Amanda and I.
There is a couple of questions in the chat box. So would Matthew like to ask his question if he's there?
Hi, yeah. I'm just interested that if Space Hive operates as a platform on which to crowdfund, does Space Hive as an organisation take a percentage cut of the total raise, similar to, say, GoFundMe?
Yes, so it's not a cut of the total raise, but rather you can consider it like a success fee. So the way that it works is you load your project costs onto the platform, and then there is 5% added on top. So your crowdfunding target will include the platform fees. So it's not taken away at the end. It's completely free at the point of use. It's only if you hit your target using the platform that the fee applies. If your project is directly involved in the coronavirus emergency, so whether it's providing food or other provisions, there may be a fee waiver available for those projects. So, and we are continuing that this year. So yeah, if you let us know what your project is, that could also be possible. But all of it's calculated for you, no maths, nothing you need to do yourself, and it's there on the page for everyone to see as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Matthew.
Wonderful. I've also got Richard Morris said he had a problem with donating and thinks it might be a barrier. Did you want to say anything, Richard?
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. Caitlin, obviously some great projects there, and the idea of it sort of is good. However, my experience using SpaceHive was cumbersome, difficult, and turned me off the idea of SpaceHive, I have to confess. And I worry about local smaller charities and people going through this process. They'll see it as a barrier. What it's easy if people just donate in many ways. I know that you're giving more ultimately, but it is quite a cumbersome bureaucratic process to get what you need.
Yes, Richard, I know you ran a project with us and you did encounter some unique challenges with the payment providers that we use. So I do apologise for that. Fortunately, there are some challenges to setting up payment providers if organisations haven't used them before. Once they are set up, you can use them again and again seamlessly. But as you can imagine, because it's online payments, they do ask for certain organisation details, and there's a verification process before they will enable groups to take money through their platforms. So yeah, apologies to hear that. I can say that SpaceHive is adding a third payment provider, which we hope will make the process even more seamless for groups crowdfunding with us, because it will enable people to pay directly with their cards, which can be a way that some people are more comfortable to make online payments with. There will always be a challenge to get people to make online payments if they're not comfortable with them. And that is why we do facilitate offline donations. So if your community group likes to take cash, and when that's safe to do so, whatever it might be, we can support you to load that onto the platform as well. So I hope that provides some reassurance that we're making changes to the platform, but also in your case, there was a particular unique challenge. But yes, we do have a support at spacehive.com email address. So if anyone encounters any challenges with payments, yeah, you can alert us to them really quickly, and we'll be straight on.
That's good to hear, Caitlin. And I like the flexibility of online and offline. That's good.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
essential. Yeah, no problem.
I think it's probably a bit like everything this year. We've learned a huge amount of things about IT that none of us ever thought we'd ever need to know.
Well, yeah, here we are.
trying to hold a meeting on Zoom.
Internet, that was fairly smooth.
Yeah, I can only see 3 people and it's all just a bit chaos. But yes, I mean, hopefully going forward, these are things we can learn from, can't we? Amanda, have you got anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair acknowledgement, and that when we did launch this, we launched it at speed at a time when people were responding very hard to an emergency situation. So we were very successful in terms of the number of the projects that managed to hit their targets. But the feedback from them was that there were some challenges because of that process. Fortunately, Maddie's stated that County Council are more than happy to provide support to volunteer schemes that are looking to set up project ideas. And then in addition to that, we're very fortunate that we've got Helen, Tonya and Kate from the volunteer centres that have had first-hand experience, and because of their role and function in terms of delivering that Good Neighbour Network scheme, that's part and parcel of that role they will play about how they support others. So we're really conscious about how we build that network of support. So it's not a case of saying, there you go, you're on your own, but there's a lot of shared learning that can be had. And I know that Jackie Phillips, who's on the call with us, will be able to share her experience about how she managed to access funding that she didn't even realise was available. So it does provide ample opportunities, and we're really keen about how we get collaboration with the County Council in particular, as the Highways Authority with responsibility for transport, but also about how we amplify private sector in terms of getting investment in the communities. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Now we've got about 5 minutes left, and one question from Nick, and then we'll see what ideas anyone's got. Nick, are you there?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm doing a seance.
Yes, I am here. I shall knock on the table so you can hear me.
Okay, you're here.
Yeah, I just personally, I saw on Space Hive a project from, I think, an Eastern European charity called Like You. It's based in Worcester, trying to set up a community centre to sort of meet the needs of the community during COVID. It seemed like a really positive route forward to using a fairly dilapidated old building to me, and that was unsuccessful. I just wondered what feedback is given back to those organisations that are unsuccessful to help them kind of put together more projects in the future that have a better chance of being successful, and what they can learn from that.
Yes, that project was unsuccessful, and I think in that particular case, the project creator had various challenges for their project, and were focusing on grant applications, and so didn't necessarily have the time to plan a crowdfunding campaign, and didn't want to extend the project any further and to continue. So when projects do fail, they're absolutely supported to come back and create a new crowdfunding campaign, whether that's immediately or perhaps if they want to wait until the next deadline. So I think it's worth saying, where projects do get underway with their campaigns and start to amass support, particularly when they get a pledge from the council or other large backers, they've got a very high chance of hitting their target. So if you get to above 90% funded, you're 96.1% likely to hit your target or something like that. So it's very, very unlikely once you do get going that you will fail. But yeah, absolutely. We've had campaigns that have downsized or have rethought their project or engaged the community more before they get started next time. So there's various reasons why campaigns can fail, but yeah, we're on hand to help them relaunch if they want to.
Amanda, anything to add to that? And I see you've put in the chat that we will help younger people. So do you want to wrap those two up together?
Yeah, I think in terms of lessons learned, Nick, from a council perspective, I have ongoing conversations with county colleagues about the need to work differently. This is not a grant application process. This is about changing the way we work, and it's about asset-based approaches. So the whole reason why we have this platform is about how we amplify what's going on in communities in order to support them, which means that actually as district councils, in terms of how we support, is not solely around the financial support. It's also about the signposting, it's raising awareness, it's making connections with other organisations or people that might be interested in funding that particular project. And that very much is a different way of working for many. Worcester City, for example, I know struggle with that concept, and the county council themselves probably aren't set up at the minute to respond in that way. Now we're joined this afternoon by Alan Warnock, who is a colleague from the county council that's leading on the asset-based community development work from public health's perspective, and it's about how organisationally we change our approach. And Malvern and Wychavon are committed to that, but we need to work with partners to ensure that they are also. And I think finally, in terms of that young people element, yeah, absolutely, Matthew. So I know you're working closely with Claire Vaughan, and we've provided an opportunity for utilisation of the Speyside platform for your projects. And I know you've already successfully engaged with Anne Wynne-Jones, and no doubt we'll look to make connections with Fee moving forward. So yeah, I think it's part of an ongoing conversation, isn't it? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just check the chat box.
I'd also add on children and young people, we've been working with the Co-op Foundation, who support children and young people. to develop a guide on how young people can get more involved in crowdfunding, because research shows that whilst young people are great at raising funds, it's often not their ideas that get put forward and they raise funds for. So that's something we're actively looking at this year.
Wonderful.
May I raise another point on young people? A general point?
You can.
Yeah, thank you. It's unfortunate that, Nigel Eggleton couldn't be with us today from First Midland Red, because the Vale Public Transport Group had a very useful and positive meeting with him actually just yesterday. Sorry, that's Friday, days merge into each other now. And one thing we put to him, we're trying to spread the word, trying to get a bit of a campaign about this, because we feel very strongly that the age at which young people get concessions on travel should be raised. It's amazingly 1972 since the school leaving age was raised to 16. And so it's almost half a century since that age was raised for young people's travel. And at a time when young people are really feeling the effects of the present COVID crisis with regard to the jobs market, a lot in the hospitality sector, a lot in the leisure sector, it's finding jobs, it's getting interviews to jobs. They may, once they get a job, if they're lucky enough, have to travel further from their homes. So it's to help give direct help to young people that way. It's a green policy in that it encourages people to stay in public transport for longer, rather than perhaps they get the first car and never be seen in the public transport market again. It's an important point of view of boosting numbers on public transport, which have taken a real hit during the present pandemic. It's a levelling up situation. We'll talk about levelling up. Different parts of the country, urban areas have transport schemes covering 16 to 18-year-olds, buses and trains. But it's a patchwork quilt over the country. Many rural areas and towns aren't covered. And it would also simplify current fare structures, particularly in the railways. And those things together, coupled with the fact, as I say, it's half a century since the age at which young people could access half fare concessions, I think is an incredible argument in favour of doing something now, putting pressure on politicians, which we have started to do. I've been in touch with local MPs and also with the chairman of the All-Party Select Committee on Transport. It may be a rather general issue compared to what we've been talking about today, but I think it's really, really important that we look at the aspect of how young people are suffering at the moment and how to help them in the future.
Thank you. I'm sure we can all take that up with our local politicians, which would probably be me, but there you go.
Thank you. Harriet's been written to on a number of occasions.
Yeah. Any of the politicians in the room, feel yourself fully lobbied, okay? Right, so we haven't had time to actually go ask everyone what their ideas are, which is probably like the most important bit, but I see everyone's got their next 4 o'clock Zoom.
And there is another opportunity.
Wonderful. So we've got the workshops coming up. What I would say is everyone's here to support you. So if you've got an idea, get in touch, you know, just let us know, because we really are keen to move this forward. So I think Amanda said we're going to have a rate the event. I have no idea how that's going to work. She'll sort that out for me whilst I'm wrapping up. What we're committed to do across both councils is to continue to raise the profile of community transport. Oh, there you go. And also to support the new technological solutions, because clearly we've learned a lot in the last 12 months, and I really think we're going to learn a lot in the next 12 months more. What we need to do is focus on the very local and hyper-local community solutions and community assets. I'm really passionate about the Good Neighbour scheme and the Good Neighbour network, so, you know, pushing on that and getting everyone involved in that. We want to work more closely with the private sector and get them to support the local communities. And I think we saw quite a lot of that in Space Hive with local companies such as Morgan's really investing in local community projects. So that's something we're really keen to push on. And also changing to this asset-based approach. I think Amanda said ABC, asset-based community development, that's what it's called. And sort of changing the way we do things. So rather than a top-down approach where we sort of decide perhaps what we think communities should do, to really work from the bottom up with the community transport providers, with everyone, and do everything together. So I hope that makes sense. We've got the 4th leg of this, although it should probably be a wheel, to be honest, Amanda, is spring 2020. We've got a huge amount to do. So I hope it was all helpful for you. And obviously Amanda is the go-to person for any information. So there you go. Any final comments or questions before we all go to our next Zoom meeting?
Yeah. So Sarah, we've just completed the rate your poll. Thank you everyone. And it was largely in the very good to good and a few averages. So really keen on the averages for you to maybe liaise with me about even better if in particular. What I'll do is we'll do some summary action notes as a result of this event and share them. And obviously we'll share the slides as well, because some of the context from some of the speakers is really helpful to know. We'll also share John's report on electric vehicles with all. And we've made connections in terms of Nick engaging with Community Transport Consortium on that digital compatibility and how they're engaged as part of that process. So lots to follow up on. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you very much.